Welcome back, pro wrestling fans. Welcome back, IWC. It's your old buddy, the Guardian of Chaos, Big Daddy. And I tell it like it is. Coming to you live to tape, 25 feet below the surface of the earth, here on Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel for Chaos Corner. It's gonna be an extravaganza, a bonanza. So drop an elbow on that like button, share this out, leave a comment, inbox me, email me, say something. One man, unique, unedited, unscripted, raw dog for you, the fans. Now on today's episode of Chaos Corner, as we approach episode 400, that's right, 400 shows, because it's not a podcast, of Chaos Corner. Sit back and relax, grab a cup of coffee, grab a bottle of water, grab a snack, because it's early in the morning here in the bunker for story time with the GOC. That's me. My over 50 years of being a historian, a researcher, a scout, an agent, a producer, a fan, a smark, a mark. That's right, I said it, a mark. And of course, my over 3 decades as being a pro wrestling manager, from pillar to post and coast to coast and border to border, coming out 2 and 3 times in a single night with my entourage and taking the fucking bumps. That's right, I said it, taking the bumps. How many of you out there can say that in this IWC, in the pro wrestling community? Unless you've been in the ring. For the rest of you geeks and goons and dweebs and nerds and neckbeards and mouth breathers that are all in the IWC, that sit there and give your opinion and give your outlook and your viewpoints and your thoughts, and that's great, man. All power to you. You're allowed to do that in this country. Well, at least for now anyway, because we know the current state of 2024 and the chaos swirling around the world, and that's pun intended. But until you've actually stepped in that ring and done what I've done and what other stars do and talent do that come out to the podcast community, and again, this is a show, this is not a podcast, then you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You've never experienced it. I respect everyone. Much love and respect for everyone that shows up here. But let's remember the difference of who's been there and who hasn't. We're coming up on 3,000 total videos here on the channel. Go to the playlist. I cover everything from classic videos to my own personal videos, and of course my wrestling career and all the people that were on the events that I was involved with. Every story that I tell here, all you have to do is go to the channel, navigate, and you'll see the actual footage live. And then of course, whether I follow WWE, AEW, MLW, the NWA, Ring of Honor, New Japan, Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling, AAA, CMLL, does it really matter? Because I cover it all. And speaking of that, let me get this out of the way. Follow me on all social media platforms, and you know what they are. Here on Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel. On Instagram, it's The Guardian of Chaos. On Twitter, aka X, you can reach me at Big Daddy GOC, and the GOC stands for The Guardian of Chaos. On Facebook, I have 2 accounts, one personal, one professional, because I have to promote. That's what I do. I put other people over. It's not about getting over, it's about going over, and it's about giving back and putting other people over. That's what I do here on Chaos Corner. So follow me at J Brony. Sound it out just like it sounds. J Brony with an I. And of course, in honor of my heritage, Prodigio Fidelis El Guardian. That's right. Prodigio Fidelis El Guardian. Follow me on Gitter, Gab, Truth Social, Rumble. I cover it all in the IWC. So kick back, as I said, story time, storytelling with the GOC. We'll have some interesting news notes, tidbits and facts of historical, priceless, classic information. That's why you come here. Not only because of who I am and what I've done in this industry, in this business, and my connections even to this day with the Paradise Four, because you learn things. You don't come here for viewpoints and opinions and thoughts and fantasy booking. You come here and get facts. So when you go back to work, or you go to your next event, or you go to the bar, or you go to the pub, the tavern, the restaurant, the water cooler, family dinner, your friends in the industry, so you can actually hold an educated conversation and contribute to society with things that are actual facts. That's why you guys come here. I'm coming up on almost, 1,500 subscribers. Well over that 4,000 watch videos. I'm still working on going live. I've done a couple of shows. I'm still trying to figure out all the graphics and all the different angles and the different cameras and lightings and which way to do it, because you know me. There's no green screens, there's no graphics, there's no music. I keep it simple, as I always say, raw dog for you, the fans. The op board is from the 80s with levers and buttons and only 2 different camera angles. And of course, you know I have that bitch who's right here. And no offense, man, kayfabe, lighten up. That I got heat with her because she always interrupts Chaos Corner. It's almost unacceptable. What am I going to do, man? So again, I appreciate you guys and my members. Thank you so much. Let me shout out a couple of the top members, folks that I couldn't do it without you. I acknowledge the OTS Tribal Queen, and that's you, Jen. Thanks for being here. My buddy Austin Nance. I hope you're doing well, Austin. Of course, the Scripps Wrestling Federation is also a member here on Chaos Corner, and others too numerous to mention. So stick with me. Let's continue to grow this. I am the old man brand, the over 50 demo god in this industry. So come here to the learning tree of the GOC about this business. Again, I can't thank you enough. We're going to go a little while. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll break it up into 2 parts. I mean, who knows? I'm still trying to figure out that live thing. Again, everybody else uses Stream Elements and StreamYard and their laptops, and I go it differently. I'm hard-headed. Haven't you figured that out yet? One of a kind. A little Java. If you want a suggestion, speaking of that, not only do you get pro wrestling, the sports industry here on this channel, you also get the TV show, the reality show of Dinner for Two with myself and my beautiful wife. I believe we're coming up on episode 5 of Dinner for Two, where you'll see me in a normal, natural setting with my wife over dinner, talking about everything that you can think of, from Little People to Real Housewives to pro wrestling, today's current events, everything you can think of in a natural atmosphere, because that's what I do here. I put a face to the product. I invite you into my home, into my world, into my life, and let you see what I'm all about. And that's why here on this channel, you'll see different playlists of my boy who just passed away last week, my Maine Coon, Emilio, my best friend. I'm heartbroken. But you guys are here for me as a much-needed distraction, not only from that, but today's craziness and insane world. So you'll get that here on the channel if you like pets and animals, which we all do, who are family members. You also see videos of my family, from my daughter to my granddaughter to my son-in-law, and as I said, at the wife. So there's a personal touch, a vulnerable touch. I also talk about my sports teams, 50-year loyalists to the New York Mets, to the New York Rangers, to the New York Knicks, and as you can see back here, the only undefeated team in pro football history, the Miami Dolphins. So I let you into my life. I open up that door, because in order to get respect, you have to start with respecting yourself. Once you do that, you open other people's minds to respecting you. That's a life statement and mission that I go by. And there's 3 types of people in this world: those who don't know what happened, those who wonder what happened, And people like the GOC that make things happen day in and day out. Stay mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually fit. In this day and age, because if he's for us, nobody else can be against us. Shout out to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Because he's coming back soon. Don't be caught dead without him, and that's a shoot. So, again, let me get started here. I always have to have my opening monologue here on Chaos Corner. Big shout out to the Paradise 4, Pretty Paul Roma, Mario Mancini, Mr. Paul Perez, and big Steve Tracy. My home company, Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling. On all social media platforms, monthly shows, 2 shows a month. We run it like a territory. Here in the greater New England tri-state Northeast area, in the shadows of Titan Towers. Because you know all 4 of the Paradise 4 have worked under the guidance of WWF and WCW. Let that sink in. Let that marinate. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. And later on, as we go on, I'll give shout outs to the people that I'm fortunate and blessed enough to assist and work for and help out in this community. And there's a whole bunch of them, and I'll shout out each and every one of you guys. So don't go anywhere. Enjoy the view. Enjoy the sounds. It's a little overcast here today. Yesterday, if you've seen GOC on the road, you could see the particles floating all through the air. It was a nice sunny day. And what is it today? A little overcast. Don't think there's not a lot of things going on. Protests in this country with the under 30 crowd. You got your head up your ass. You know nothing about history, nothing about nothing. Do some research. The border invasion, inflation, the economy, food prices, gas prices. Where's this country leading to? Sending billions overseas to foreign countries while we can't take care of our own? It's only going to get worse. That's why I say stay in faith, not fear. That's the message we put out here. Well, stand by it. Take a sip. And again, thank you guys for being here. Much love and respect. And you know I always have to adjust. Oh, hold on. No black cherry today. It's the honey lemon. Wrapped up in chains, as we all are in life. But me specifically, if you go to my YouTube channel, which you're on here right now, read the introduction about who I am, what I've done, what I'm all about, and you'll understand the chains and 25 years behind the walls. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm going all the way back to over 25 years ago here on Storytime. Big shout out to the late, great Captain Lou Albano and Burt Randolph Sugar. A match made in heaven. And for those that know, you know, the glue that holds it all together. Organizations and federations. That's what we're going to talk about in this chapter. The organizations that make wrestling work. The history of certain promotions. Tele-savvy promoters. Telly, get it? The telly. WrestleMania, cable, pay-per-view, which now between the AEW and the WWE, whether you got the peacock, or you do it traditionally through your cable provider, which they're robbing and screwing you there too. Between AEW uploading now from 4 pay-per-views to like 9 a year, and then pretty soon they'll be going monthly, I'm sure, like the WWE does. I mean, in this day and age and economy, how is everyone, the working man and working gal, supposed to buy the product? How about lowering it down from your $40 and $50 and $60 if it's boxing or UFC to $20 where people can afford it? And you'll get triple the numbers because we know the ratings are in the jitter. Especially for AEW. You could bring in Okada and Ospreay and Monet and whoever else you want to bring in. All talented, great athletes, especially Ospreay. And you still have your stalwarts there like Mox and Danielson and, the Hartley boys. And you guys know what I'm talking about. And the ratings are still the same. And I watch the product. I'm included in those ratings. Big mistakes by TK. Who knows? Still averaging around 750,000 fans a week for the number 1 show on Dynamite. The needle's not moving. It's all about emotional investment. storytelling, ring psychology. They have a long way to go. Listen, only in business for 5 years, but there were all startup companies at one time, whether it be the legendary ECW, whether it be when WCW bought out Jim Crockett Promotions, all the way back to the territory days, which I really miss. You could talk about Evolve Pro Wrestling. You could talk about Ring of Honor, TNA, Impact, whatever you want to call it. They all started somewhere. And they all stayed around for a little bit of time. AEW is no different. They just have deep pockets. And you see the status and the explosion of the WWE and what they're doing with Cody and Drew McIntyre. And the injuries now to Seth Rollins and to Rhea Ripley has really hurt. But the story of the bloodline, Solo Sikoa, the Usos, Roman Reigns, bringing in Tamatanga. Jacob Fatu has just signed. You've never seen anything like him. I'm sure they'll be bringing in Zilla. Shout out to Afa and Sika. Unbelievable. Rest in peace, High Chief Peter Maivia. You know my history of working with Rikishi, Umaga, Yokozuna, LA Smooth. The list goes on and on and on. It really does. Aloha and mahalo for all my friends on the Pac Rim. All my friends over in the islands, brother. Hang loose. And of course, also on the Pac Rim, all my fans over there in Japan. Konnichiwa, bitches. Origato from the Chaos-san. No offense, man. They not all my friends down south from the islands, Puerto Rico, Mexico, South America. All over. And even my boys and girls up above the border in Canada. Boy, you got your issues up there. Shout out over to my friends across the pond in the UK. Down under in Australia. My buddies over in Ireland. There's a lot going on. Even my fans in India. I know you're out there watching because I'm worldwide. I say it all the time. I'm going to say it again. From border to border, coast to coast, and pillar to post. So now that I have almost a 20-minute opening monologue, maybe I will do this into 2 parts. Let's get back to the glue that holds it all together. So bear with me. Again, remember, raw dog for you, the fans. While the wrestlers are the stars of the show, the players, if you will, the organizations and federations that stage the matches are the basis of wrestling. Its very fabric, and have been since the beginning of wrestling. The organizations and federations of today are a natural outgrowth of the old-time promoters who turned the sport of wrestling into a form of mass entertainment. They're the ones who are responsible for promoting wrestling, publicizing it, and plotting its course. Now remember the time frame here. We are in the time machine at Chaos Corner. We are jumping back well over 20 years ago. Keep that in mind, but it still applies to today. And that's why I bring up the comparison of the rear view mirror and why it's smaller, and then the windshield and why it's bigger. You always look back in the rear view mirror for safety and comfort, to respect the ones who paved the way for you and for us. No one's saying stay back there and be an old grizzled veteran or a bitter old man, which I'm certainly not. But respect it, honor it, because without that rear view mirror in the past, you cannot get to where you are here in the present. And you dang sure can't get to where you're going in the future. So look in that rear view mirror, respect it, and then refocus to where you are, and then the big windshield in front of you, and put the pedal to the metal, full speed ahead. Keep living your life. Keep doing what you want to do. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. And if someone tells you you can't do something, look them in the eye and tell them, watch me. Head on a swivel, situational awareness. Keep your family and friends close, like-minded individuals. And if that's the message I could put out there that will sink into you, remember where you heard it and remember to follow it. Let's get back to story time with the GOC. Today, there are two major organizations on the professional wrestling landscape. And remember the time machine, we're not talking about the WWE and AEW, although it applies. The World Wrestling Federation and World Championship Wrestling. And several smaller ones, Survive and Thrive, are kind of like the indies today, which are booming in 2024. The indies are booming. You can make a living. You can make a career. You're not going to get rich, but you can ply your trade, and you can travel this country if you have the hustle. And the indies are booming. And remember, that's where all the stars come from, the rookies, the veterans, and that's where all the old-timers go back for a payday. Keep that in mind. The independent pro wrestling scene is the backbone of this fucking industry and business. And I apologize for cussing. Only the most hardcore fan can keep track of who is who and who belongs to which. You can tell the players without a scorecard, and you have to update it all the time. And that's true to today. So that's why what I read from and what I put out to you fans not only applies to 10 years ago, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it applies in 2024. That's why I tell you when you come here, you learn something. You don't walk away with, what? What did I just listen to? Views, thoughts, opinions? What? Now I know something. In this chapter, I'll give you an overview of promoters and their world. How they came into being, how they grew, and what stars they feature, and try to sort it out for you. In the beginning, back about the time of Father Adam, let that marinate, first heard the stampede of the apple sellers. There were no organizations nor federations. There were only barnstormers, carnival operators, you carnies, and just plain old hustlers who homesteaded areas, staking out the territory and holding wrestling bouts there. These early day Barnums of wrestling were con men, most of them who had shaken hands with the process server more than once. And they were the forerunners of the wrestling promoter, the freelance entrepreneurs who roamed the landscape in the early 20th century. They had no more legal right to control a territory than a claim jumper, but they agreed amongst themselves to respect their territorial boundaries, much like Vince McMahon blew it up in the 80s. You piece of goo. I'm just saying, don't be offended. And no offense, Vince. And I know someone will get this to you because you know who I am and who I run with. And if you don't, I don't care anyway. Soon the countryside took on the look of a patchwork shed put together by drunken carpenters as each territory abutted and sometimes even overran an already established one. Their ranks were filled with boxing promoters such as Jack Curley and Jesse McMahon, ex-wrestlers such as Toots Mont and Ed Strangler Lewis, and promoters such as Jack Pfeffer, who came straight into wrestling with no previous career stops along the way. Go Google it. No. I'm not going to take someone else's saying, and I don't like Google anyway. Go it for your privacy. Go it. By the 1930s, the wrestling landscape was as depressed as the rest of the country, kind of like here in 2024. History always repeats itself. The champions had the lifespans of mayflies, while matches were interminable, going on until the wee hours of the morning. Promoters were double-crossing what few attractions they still had, not to mention each other. Accordingly, crowds, with the notable exception of those who only consistent drawing card during this period, and that would be came out in droves to watch Jim Landis. Let that name sink in. Again, go it. Had fallen off disastrously. Something had to be done, and fast. The promoters were barely earning enough to survive on. And not like today. You see Deep Pockets, TK, Endeavor, WWE, whatever you want to call it. Promoter Toots Mont understood that wrestling fans would no longer stand for even the biggest name wrestler holding a headlock on an opponent for 5 minutes or more, and that's the problem in today's industry. He borrowed an idea from vaudeville, the blackouts, where acts lasted but a few minutes and gave wrestling fans more entertainment, bang for their buck, by imposing time limits of 10 or 15 minutes. Other innovations of the era included the introduction of character wrestlers. The good guy, the bad guy, good versus evil, white hat, black hat. Oppositions and novelty acts like midget wrestling or micro stars, and women wrestlers, which is huge today here in 2024 with some incredible athletes, the women. More promoters got into the game as it became more viable. Rudy Dusek in Nebraska, Ed White in Chicago, Pinky George in Iowa, Tony Stetcher in Minnesota, Ray Fabiani in Tulsa, Nick Gulas and Roy Welch in Nashville, Sam Mushnick in St. Louis, Morris Siegel in Houston, and Paul Bowser in Boston. Say that 3 times fast. They weathered the tough times of the Depression and emerged into the sunshine of the eagerly awaited post-war boom. That's when wrestling suddenly found itself in a boom of its own. This one courtesy of television, the advent of television. All of a sudden, the new golden age of wrestling had arrived, and the promoters were going to make sure they made the most of it. The true golden age, the advent of television. And then to the golden age of the late 70s, early 80s, which a lot of people in today's day and age call rock and wrestling, the breakup of the territories. You guys know that. And then they want to call whatever age they call it now, but those are the true golden ages. You heard it here. Most of the promoters formed an organization in 1948 called the National Wrestling Alliance, which covered the entire West Coast from Seattle to San Diego and included Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, and almost the entire South. Let that marinate. Plus Mexico, Australia, and parts of Japan and Canada. But the NWA was an organization in name only. It was really a loose-knit confederation of promoters, most of whom were, in the words of the great Lou Thez, hypocrites and lowlifes who'd stage a dogfight if they thought it would draw money. In his one-line book, Hooker, An Authentic Wrestler's Adventures Inside the Bizarre World of Pro Wrestling, you can go to the Lou Thez webpage if it still exists. Thez recounts one NWA annual meeting where the membership had listed to a report from some self-important judge from Texas who'd been brought in to mediate an internal dispute between 2 Texas promoters. The judge had obviously resolved the matter in a way to fatten his own pockets, and at the end of his report, one promoter stood up and said, "Well, this guy looks like the type who'd steal a hot stove and come back the next day for the lid, so I suppose he'll fit right in with us," to quote. A lot of people laughed at the remark, but some members got indignant, as always happens when someone hits too close to the truth, like current day politics. Yeah, I said it. The typical NWA convention had all the backslapping found at a Shriners convention, and all the backstabbing found at a reunion of the Borga family. As each promoter tried to get the better of fellow Alliance members, Vince McMahon Sr. was the only major promoter not to join the NWA. He controlled the Washington, D.C. territory, which ran from Richmond, Virginia, up to Lewiston, Maine, and of course what we know as New York City. McWrestling, the McMahons, and the WWF. Remember where we are, remember the time machine. Even though wrestling's cast of characters always seems to be changing, there's been one constant throughout the years: the McMahon family. The patriarch of the McMahon clan was Jess McMahon, a boxing promoter who turned to wrestling. A debonair, handsome gentleman of indeterminate age, Jess had co-promoted the heavyweight championship boxing match between Jess Willard and Jack Johnson in 1915, and then joined Tex Rickard in bringing big-time boxing to the Mecca, Madison Square Garden. From there was an easy transition into promoting wrestling bouts, first in the Garden and then throughout the East Coast. Unto the second generation. His son, Vince McMahon Sr., became the second member of wrestling's first family to enter the game on the promotional side. Originally, Vince Sr. ran something called Capital Wrestling out of Washington, D.C. What a shithole D.C. is. In every form and every way, especially the politicians. No offense, man, lighten up, kayfabe. A territory which covered the eastern seaboard from Virginia all the way up to Maine and as far west as the Alleghenies, about the same region covered by America's first coaxial television cable. Pretty smart. The near approximation of McMahon's territory in the area covered by the coaxial cable gave McMahon a huge advantage in selling his local wrestling bouts to the fledgling TV medium, which was desperately searching for programming to fill its screens. Vince Sr. teamed up with the old promoter Toots Mott, who controlled the talent just as Vince controlled the TV access. Together they became the most successful wrestling promotion of the late 40s and early 50s. Capital Wrestling's territory was so large and its operations so successful and lucrative that they didn't need to join the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, the oldest wrestling organization in the United States of America. And so they went on their merry way, stronger as a single entity than the NWA was as a coalition. Should I do this in a part 1 and part 2? We're 30 minutes in here, fans. Should I come back for a part 2? We still have a little ways to go. Let's do this Capital Wrestling's rise to the top. One of the Capital's first great attractions was Antonina Rocca, the Argentine acrobat whom they imported in the late 40s. Then they brought in Gorgeous George from the West Coast, and he caused an instant sensation. He was, after all, a made-for-TV celebrity. McMahon and Mott carried on a Cold War with the NWA throughout the 1950s. But in 1961, the war heated up over a new wrestler on the scene, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. How about that for history? Rogers, the biggest draw since Rocca and Gorgeous George, had won the NWA World Heavyweight Championship belt from Pat O'Connor at Chicago's Comiskey Park in 1961. But soon thereafter, the NWA found that their champion had gone over to Toots Mott, who had taken over Rogers' bookings and was using him exclusively in the McMahon-Mott Eastern Circuit. Only on rare occasions would a magnanimous Mott consent for Rogers to wrestle for the NWA promoters, allowing barely a handful of dates each month. Things got so bad that Sam Mushnick, then head of the NWA, was heard to mumble aloud to anyone who would listen, "Toots controls Rogers now, and he's seeing to it that we can't even use our own champion." Mushnick persuaded the venerable Lou Thez, who had first held the World Championship back in 1937 and 5 times thereafter. Let this marinate for a second as we roll on here on Chaos Corner, story time, to take on Rogers and bring the belt back home. But even though Thez was to beat Rogers in one fall in January of 1963, the East Coast Circuit continued to recognize Rogers as champion. 4 months later, in May of 1963, McMahon and Mott formed the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, the WWF. And while not precisely worldwide, it covered only the eastern seaboard. It was an impressive territory, with an impressive sounding name. Soon, one of the W's was dropped and it became the WWF. Shortly thereafter, the McMahon-Mott tandem came to an end. Mott, who had been on the scene since God knows when, and even God wasn't sure of the when. Decided to pack it in and sold his interest in the WWF back to Vince McMahon Sr. Then resold that interest to Gorilla Monsoon, Phil Zacco, and Arnold Skolin, keeping a majority interest in a new entity for himself. So let that marinate. Let that sink in. I'm going to take a quick 5-minute break. Come back with part 2 of Story Time with the GOC here on Chaos Corner, Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel, with a new McMahon twist. So don't go anywhere. 35 minutes for part 1. We'll come back with part 2. You guys aren't going to miss the information and the facts that I have. It's really going to be a banger, as the kids say. The glue that holds it all together. Organizations and federations. I'll say that to say this, because I tell it like it is. Don't you dare miss it. Come on back. Part 2 is coming right up.